the same for us as well. There are times when we can sit under teaching. There are times when we can be fed. But there comes a time where we must transition from constantly being fed to being willing to lead and feed others. If all we ever do is sit there and eat spiritually without ever being fed, we will become spiritually unhealthy. In fact, we will become spiritually, forgive me for putting it this way, spiritually fat. We will become fat when we do not exercise, when we do not carry out, when we do not take the message of faith, the message of hope, the message of grace, the message of salvation to a world. We cannot just constantly sit there and eat without being willing to minister, without being willing to take the gospel out. So I ask you, are you willing to lead? Are you willing to take that next step? Are you willing to say, you know what? I am continually going to be fed, but in the same way, I am willing to lead others so that they too can come to an understanding, so that they too can come to a relationship with Jesus Christ. So with that in mind, Paul and his group, they traveled from Paphos to Perga. They left the island of Cyprus, coming to Perga on the mainland of what is today known as Turkey. So what did they do? You see, we cannot become so comfortable in where we are at, in our position, in our place, in our pew, that we are not willing to let God move us, that we are not willing to let God call us to go. The mission field is not you stay here and wait for them to come to you. The mission field of what Jesus Christ told them was to go to the ends of the earth, to take the initiative, to take the action, to take the message out. And so they did not stay settled in Cyprus, which was Barnabas' hometown. They were willing to take it even further. Why? So that others could hear, so that others could see, and so that others could believe. God needs us. God needs us to be willing and ready to go. God needs us to be ready to get in the game. God needs us to be ready, to willing to go out and serve and prepare and preach the message and declare the message to the world. Sometimes it means leaving where we've had success before and going to an area where we may face opposition, where we may face problems, where we may even face difficulties, and we may even face rejection. But the willingness and the opportunity is us saying to God, here I am, God, use me to further your kingdom. Why? Well, sometimes we need to recognize who we count on and who we depend on and who are our traveling companions. John, he thought, was his traveling companion, but John felt it was necessary to return to Jerusalem. In this place, there is no reference as to why John felt it necessary to return to Jerusalem. But Paul didn't appreciate his departure. Paul didn't appreciate him leaving halfway into the game. He seems to have lost confidence in Mark and as a missionary companion, as a member of the team. You see, even great and godly men still have problems. So you may be sitting here today, great and godly women still have problems. That doesn't mean that when we follow Jesus Christ that we are problem-free. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have difficulties. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have differences of opinions. But it does mean that we do not need to count on men to accomplish God's task. There is only one who has promised you that he will never leave you. There is only one who has ever promised that he will never forsake you. There is only one that is truly at all times dependable. And that's God. Jesus is the only one who promised you that he would never leave you nor forsake you, and that he is with you always to the very end of the age. So after they then go to Perga, guess what they do? They stay there for a little while, and then they travel again. This time they travel to Pisidian Antioch. Now, when we look at Antioch, the customary tradition was when teachers would come in, they would open up the synagogue and they would say, come and teach so that we could learn, so that we can grow in our walk, so that we can grow in our faith. And so Paul was given the opportunity to share the gospel. The same way we are given the opportunity to share the gospel. So I ask you, when you are given the opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, do you take it? And you say, whoa, wait, you know what? Maybe that's the preacher's job. Ain't that what we pay Frank to do? No. We are all called to share, to proclaim, to declare the message of the gospel to a world who desperately needs to hear it. Go on social media. You'll see people that declare so many things. People that will have their soapboxes of what it is. But I tell you, let's get out of the comfort of just social media and let's get into the real world and let's declare Jesus Christ to people who desperately need to hear about Him. There are our neighbors. There are our friends. There are our co-workers. They may even be our spouses or our children or our grandchildren that need to hear the message of Jesus Christ. And we have been given the opportunity in sitting around that table. We have been given that opportunity and being connected with them in some way to declare that message. But you know what? There's two things we don't talk about, preacher. And one of them's politics. And you know what the other is. But I'm not telling you to talk about religion. I'm telling you to talk about a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're talking about religion, you can leave that off the table. But you don't leave off the table a relationship with Jesus Christ and how much He loves you and how much He loves them. So Paul begins the sermon, and taking that opportunity, Paul begins the sermon and he holds no punches. That's what I love about Paul. Paul is one that is direct. Paul is one that says, I'm just going to tell you the way it is. I'm going to tell you the gospel, and if it offends you, that's your problem. And he goes on to share this message, and he says, men of Israel who fear God, not a fear of God the way I'm afraid of spiders, not the men of God the way that I'm afraid of climbing on a ladder, not the men of God, the fear of God who are afraid of getting on ice skates. No, the men of God who fear God, that respect Him, that love Him. And see, we are called to fear God with a respect, with a love. He says, you know what? They've raised up a Savior, and His name is Jesus. And over the next month, you're going to hear a lot about this Jesus. And we're going to preciously love this little baby Jesus. We're going to hold special services about this little baby Jesus. We're going to sing songs about this little baby Jesus. But I tell you, this Jesus Christ is not just a baby. This Jesus Christ is the Son of God who came to earth to save us from our sins, to save us from ourselves, to save us from death, to give us life, to celebrate what He has done. And so what does Paul do? He goes through the history of Israel, and he shows the promise of Jesus Christ coming throughout. And he uses examples of people like that of John the Baptist, a great preacher who had many followers. But John the Baptist, what did he say about this Jesus? A man whose shoes I'm not even unworthy to tie down, stoop down and untie. He says he took them down. He says, this Jesus Christ, what did He do? This Jesus Christ did the same thing for the Jews, the same thing He does for you and for me. He hung on a tree. He hung on a tree that looks like that. He took our curse. He took our punishment. He took our pain. Why? Because He loved us. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and 23 says, cursed is the man who hung on a tree, who is cursed by God. Why? Because He loved you, because He loved me. So what does He do? Paul then goes and says, let me tell you about this Jesus who is no longer dead, a Jesus who is alive, and alive forevermore. God raised Him from the dead. Christianity is not a set of rules and regulations. Christianity itself is a proclamation of facts that concern what God has done for you and for me. And He said, God has fulfilled this for His children. The resurrection means that Jesus truly is the unique Son of God. And it proves that he utterly holy even in the work of the cross. And what he did on that cross is he hung on your cross and he hung on my cross so we didn't have to hang on it. Instead of hanging on the cross, we can hang in glory for all of eternity. He says, through this man is preached the forgiveness of sins. The promise is that because of what Jesus is and what he did for us, forgiveness is offered freely in Jesus Christ. That makes that grace so amazing. That makes that grace so awesome. That makes that grace beyond comprehension. We can't earn it. We don't deserve it, but he's given it freely to us. We can't justify ourselves before God. You're never going to be good enough to get there on your own. And that's what Paul says to them. Paul says to the Jews who've been trying to practice ritually, through sacrifices, through obeyance of the law of Moses, not just the Ten Commandments, but the law of Moses. He says, you will never be good enough, not one of you, to get there on your own. But Jesus Christ has freely given that gift to you. Everyone who has believed is justified. Not by the sacrifice of an animal, but by what Jesus Christ did on that cross that gives us life. So how'd they respond? How'd they respond? In verse 42 and 43. Look at what it says in verse 42 and 43. In Acts chapter 13, verse 42 and 43. As Paul and Barnabas were leaving the synagogue, the people invited them to speak further about these things on the next Sabbath. When the congregation was dismissed, many of the Jews and devout converts to Judaism followed Paul and Barnabas, who talked with them and urged them to continue in the grace of God. They believed. Why did they believe? I tell you, they believed for two reasons. The first was because many of the Jews and devout followed Paul and Barnabas. They were a continuing interest in their message. They were interested. They were intrigued by what he had to say. Second, because Paul and Barnabas persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. This means they had already started to trust in the grace of God. How about you? To what level, to what point do you trust in the grace of God? The grace of God goeth I. Do you go walking in the grace of God? Is your life representing the grace of God to all that come in contact with you? So then on the next Sabbath, you see, the devil didn't like it. The devil doesn't like when God moves. So the devil says, you know what? I'm going to throw up opposition. I'm going to throw up difficulty. I'm going to throw up problems and see how Paul and his party respond. And I'm going to throw up and see how real and how true these people's belief really are. Why? Because there's such a fascination that the whole city comes together to meet church. Kind of like 9/11, wasn't it? The whole city comes in together to hear the message of hope, the message of grace. The scene's easy to picture. The whole city was ready to hear the gospel for Paul. They were waiting with anticipated breath. What happens? Well, let's see what happens with that. Look here what it says in verses 44 and 45. When the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and talked abusively against Paul, what Paul was saying. They opposed the things spoken by Paul. It seems strange that these religious people who waited so long for the Messiah would now reject him when Jesus was presented to them. One great reason was that they wanted to keep the division between the Jews and the Gentiles. And if Jesus was to be the Messiah of all men, they wanted no part of it. You know, we have people in our life that we think should be saved, and to be honest with you, we have people in our life that we think they don't deserve salvation. They couldn't accept the teaching that opened such floodgates. They couldn't accept a message as God sent and tolerate some change in their teaching and practice. You know, we like things done our way. We like things done the way we think it should be done. We like things done the way it's, our way is the right way, and every other way needs to change to become like our way. Could you imagine him telling them they needed to change? That's a dirty C word, isn't it? That's a C word you can't say in church. I don't know about this church, but I know in other churches I've been in, you couldn't see that C word. That C word brought out stones. They couldn't endure that the Gentiles should be made equal with God's ancient people. Being as much concerned against the Gentiles being exalted as against their own being depressed. Some people end up rejecting Jesus because of the way he changes our relationship with other people. Some would rather hold on to their bitterness. Some would rather hold on to their animosity towards others than to turn to Jesus and be reconciled. Maybe you were grown up, raised to not like those people. Maybe they're the McCoys and you're the Hatfields. Maybe it's time you let it go. Did I get that song back in your mind? Let it go, let it go. Then Paul and Barnabas, what they do, they didn't get timid. They didn't get shy. They didn't say, let's cower away, let's hide. Because you know what? We got opposition, we're going to hide. Because what if people get offended by what I say? What if I've hurt somebody's feelings in what I say? No, it says here in the scripture they grew a bold. They had wonderful zeal for the things of God. They wouldn't let this challenge go unanswered because they really believed the truth about Jesus. When opposition comes your way and somebody presses back against you in your faith, do you fight? Or are you willing to stand your ground and stand firm? And this is what they said. Since you rejected, you stand in judgment of everlasting life. Let you go forward with what you want. And we'll turn to the Gentiles. We'll turn to the people that you don't think is really important. And the Gentiles heard this, and they were glad and glorified the word of the Lord. It was a fulfillment of the prophecy in what? The Old Testament, in Isaiah 49:6. A fulfillment in that prophecy of the Jews. That the gospel would spread to all ends of the earth. You see, when we talk about all ends of the earth, it means all groups of people, even the people that we don't think deserve it. Paul showed wisdom in not spending all his time trying to persuade them. He wasn't trying to win a debate. He wasn't trying to win an argument with hardened hearts people. He looked at what his focus was. And what happened? God blessed it. God blessed the opposition and the word of God spread. Paul and Barnabas react in understanding the blessing and let the word spread to people that they didn't think deserved it. But you know what? They did recognize something and they gave a warning. 51 and 52. Look at what he says in 51, what happens in 51 and 52. So they shook the dust from the feet and protest against them and went to Antioch. And the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. If Jewish people had to go in or through a Gentile city, when leaving the city, they shook the dust off their feet as a gesture saying, we don't want to take anything from this Gentile city with us. In this sense, Paul said, I don't want to take anything with me from you, Jesus rejecting religionists. This rejection did not make Paul and Barnabas think there was anything wrong with themselves. They knew the problem was their opposition, not themselves. If people reject you in your faith, listen to me. If people reject you in your faith, don't let it define you and don't let it stop you. How often do we let rejection stop us? I'm going to live for Jesus, and the first time you get that opposition, we're like, well, not going to do that anymore. That bit me in the... There. And they came to Antioch. They carried on the word going next to the next town. They didn't say, okay, we've got opposition, so we're done. No, they said, we're going to keep moving it forward. You see, friends, in Jesus Christ, this is what we need to do. We need to keep looking upward, and we need to be moving forward. They were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. Paul and Barnabas had joy that contradicted their circumstances. How about you? You see, joy is defined in 3 words, an acronym. Jesus, over you. That's how you have joy. When Jesus is over you. And it doesn't matter whether it's a good day. It doesn't matter whether it's a bad day. It doesn't matter when you're in illness. It doesn't matter whether you have trouble. It doesn't matter whether you have stress. Jesus is still in charge. Jesus is still in control. Don't be defined by your circumstances, friends. Be defined by the one who controls them and the one who controls you. And allow him to declare that grace, not only in your life, but also in the life of others. God's grace is so amazing. Let's declare that grace to a world that desperately needs to hear it. Let's go forward. Let's look upward. And let's declare Jesus Christ to a world who needs to hear it this day. Let's stand and sing our closing hymn. I'm going to change one of the hymns in there. God changed it. And so I let Judy know that this morning. To hymn number 343, Amazing Grace. 343.